Four of San Diego's council members pitch a new proposal to get the Chargers to stay in town. Will the team go for it?
It makes it difficult for us to find them because they kind of blend in, especially after our body's been decomposing.
The threat of Trump's wall intensifies the search for dead and dying migrants crossing into the U.S. from Mexico.
We're home.
And for the second year in a row, fans are getting a new Star Wars film in December. How's the latest chapter in the franchise? KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The Port of San Diego is moving forward with a major renovation of the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. The project comes with the blessing of neighborhood activists worried about pollution in Barrio Logan. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson is at the port headquarters with the story. Eric?
Ebony, we are outside of the port headquarters where just a few minutes ago, well, about a half hour or so ago, port commissioners voted unanimously to approve this major renovation of the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. Now, what they're doing is they're going to remove a couple of cargo sheds on that 96-acre site. That'll make it easier to move more cargo through the facility. Unfortunately, moving that cargo, more of it through the facility, means that there's going to be more pollution on site, and that had neighborhood activists worried. The warehouse sheds are coming down, more traffic moving through. They were saying they weren't, the neighborhood activists were saying that they weren't happy where this project started, but they are pretty pleased with where it ended up.
Originally, the expansion plan called for an increase of 600% in cargo throughput, as well as trucks, ships, and all activity at the port. That's almost 800 truck trips a day more. So that was why it was a big concern.
So to be able to advance a project where we're promoting green technology, protecting our air, and creating jobs, it really means a lot to me. I think this is a very important day at the port. I'm very proud of what we have accomplished.
The Port Commission did approve the project today on that unanimous vote, but the conversation is not over. In fact, that conversation is going to continue. There's talk of Perkins Elementary School perhaps installing a filtration system there to protect the kids who are inside those classrooms. Now, the port is using a $10 million federal grant to make this renovation happen. The port itself, the facility, generates about $8 million a year in revenue for the Port of San Diego, and that could double or even triple over the coming decades. Live at the Port of San Diego headquarters, I'm Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Thank you, Eric. Four San Diego City Council members have a proposal for the Chargers. They'll lease the site of Qualcomm Stadium to the team for $1 a year for 99 years. It's a last-ditch effort to keep the team in San Diego. Myrtle Cole, Chris Catt, Scott Sherman, and Lori Zapp sent a letter outlining their offer to the Chargers chairman, Dean Spanos. The letter states the Mission Valley site can be transformed into a state-of-the-art NFL experience. Spanos has been calling for a new playing facility for his team for more than 15 years. Last month, voters rejected increasing the city's hotel room tax to partially fund a downtown stadium. Tonight, the Oakland City Council is going to consider a stadium deal of its own, trying to keep the Raiders in that city. It's a $1.3 billion financing plan. The owner of the Raiders has already committed to moving the team to Las Vegas, but the NFL owners still have to approve it. Governor Jerry Brown is in Coronado, not for one, but two conferences. At the gathering to fight ocean acidification, Brown had strong words for President Barack Obama, calling for him to permanently ban new oil and gas drilling off the coast of California. Next, he met with 8 other Western governors to discuss policy.
From Wyoming to the Northern Mariana Islands, 9 chief executive officers are in California to share ideas. Montana Governor Steve Bullock says this meeting follows a toxic time.
I am optimistic, though, that our leaders, both Democrats and Republicans, can rise above that toxicity, demonstrate that government can indeed remain functional, and we as leaders can continue to be, I guess, a source of inspiration for that next generation.
It's day one of the two-day Western Governors Association winter meeting. The governors are here at historic Hotel Del in Coronado to discuss leading under President-elect Donald Trump.
There's a lot of sharp edges in the contemporary debate. So I think over time, things converge to the mean, and things will look a lot smoother down the road.
When it comes to the Affordable Health Care Act and funding for Medicaid, Democratic and Republican governors make arguments for reform.
There are millions of people who get their health insurance under Medicaid, as well as those exchanges. So it's a big issue. It affects millions of people throughout America, and I would expect and urge the Congress to move very carefully because so many lives are affected. And in California, we're going to fight to defend our rights and the well-being of our citizens.
Governor Gary Hubert of Utah says most of the leaders here share the same goals, but disagree on the process.
If they would take the Affordable Care Act and, in fact, give states more flexibility, more autonomy to do what works best in their respective state, rather than a one-size-fits-all, we'd get a better result, probably save money in the process.
Attendees say this meeting is an example of the bipartisanship needed the next 4 years.
The Western Governors meeting goes through tomorrow. They'll touch on issues including immigration, tourism, and recreational marijuana. President-elect Donald Trump continues to select members for his cabinet. There's unconfirmed news out today of two choices, a retired Navy SEAL and Montana Congressman Ryan Zinke for Interior Secretary and former Texas Governor Rick Perry to lead the Energy Department. One pick that has been officially announced by the Trump transition team. ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson for Secretary of State. AP reporter Sandy Kozel has more.
ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson is Donald Trump's final pick to be the new U.S. Secretary of State.
It is certainly surprising. Usually you look in the Secretary of State for someone who has some level of diplomatic experience, perhaps some foreign service experience. This choice would not reflect that.
The decision ends a lengthy process that included public disagreements in the Trump team. It also sets up a possible fight with Congress over Tillerson's confirmation. That's because Tillerson has connections with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
He's made extensive oil and gas deals with Russia. That's the main area of economic interchange between Russia and the United States.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are already grappling with intelligence assessments suggesting that Russia interfered with the U.S. presidential election. Trump has said Tillerson's relationship with Russia would work in his favor as Secretary of State. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
The San Diego County Board of Supervisors gave themselves a raise today. They voted to change the way their pay is calculated, which will result in an increase of about $19,000 a year. Currently, they make about $153,000. The pay hikes will cost the county an extra $88,000. SeaWorld is getting ready to chalk up two firsts with its newest park. It'll be the first one without orcas and the first one outside of the United States.
Happening now. SeaWorld is bringing more than 50 years of animal care and rescue experience to Abu Dhabi in what will be the most digitally advanced SeaWorld park ever built.
SeaWorld says the new park will include an animal rescue and rehabilitation center and will focus on educating visitors about ocean conservation. It's expected to open in 2022. Opponents of California's high-speed rail say they're not backing down. This after the board in charge of the project approved $3.2 billion in funding today. Opponents have filed a lawsuit seeking to delay the rail plan. They say this suit challenges a bill signed into law by Governor Brown that changed previous voter-approved laws to allow high-speed rail bonds to be spent on electrification.
The Constitution says you can't do that. Once the voters approve something, if you're going to change it, you've got to go back to the voters.
Officials with the California High-Speed Rail Authority call the lawsuit unnecessary. They argue voters have approved the project and the funds that have been allocated toward it. California's Board of Registered Nurses is supposed to protect the public by making sure nurses are well trained and following the law. But a new report says the board may be putting patients at risk. The state auditor said the board is too slow in processing complaints against nurses, sometimes taking more than 3 years on a complaint. They get an average of 7,500 complaints a year.
If nobody's monitoring, then how do we know that the complaint is being processed, that nurses are being held accountable, and that we are ensuring the health and the safety of patients?
The auditor's office says the board needs to set up some time frame policies for their investigations. Officials with the Board of Registered Nurses say things are taking so long because they don't have the resources. President-elect Donald Trump has promised to build a wall along the entire U.S.-Mexico border. In part one of our series, KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero explores the consequences of existing border barriers and what may happen if they expand. She joins the search for a migrant's body. A warning, some of the images are graphic and may be disturbing to some viewers.
Maximo Garcia shows me a text message from a drug mule with a crucial clue about his missing grandnephew.
Búsquelo por el arroyo del Coyote.
Look for him in the Coyote Arroyo, near the border, where there's some fencing.
Corrales.
Marco Antonio Garcia vanished crossing the border weeks ago. A drug mule using Garcia's phone said he'd found the young man's body and phone in the Arizona desert. These men have volunteered to search for him. We'll be hiking along one of the most dangerous smuggling routes near the U.S.-Mexico border. The men have let me come document the search on my iPhone.
We are now starting our search for Marco Antonio.
We drive into the desert.
If we find him, it's bad news for me. If we don't find him, it's bad news either way.
The volunteers prepare their gear for hours of walking in 100-degree heat. They stock up on water and ice. They call themselves Águilas del Desierto, eagles of the desert.
Roque, Raúl, José, Rubén.
They're plumbers, farmers, construction workers. Most are immigrants who live in San Diego. They spend their weekends rescuing migrants or recovering their bodies as far away as Arizona.
So their families will stop having uncertainty about where is my loved one, what happened to my loved one, to give them that peace.
We walk into the desert. Some of the men stay with the cars to rescue us if necessary. President Eli Ortiz reminds us not to lose sight of each other, for safety.
Recuerden, todo tiempo se tienen que mirar, okay?
Along the Coyote Arroyo, the earth is unusually fertile for a desert. It's one of the most transited border routes precisely because there's so much vegetation for cover. But that means it's also impossible to follow Ortiz's mandate to keep an eye on each other.
There's people to my left, inside of the brush, and to my right.
Signs of migrants are everywhere. Tossed Red Bulls, backpacks, dolls.
So here's a toy.
And drug mule shoes with carpet strips on the bottom to cover tracks.
These are all over the place.
Most prevalent are these black gallon jugs, which smugglers sell as a sort of supernatural, strength-inducing water. I'm following a volunteer named Jose Hennis. He says it's hard to spot bodies in this area because of all the foliage. Dying migrants often crawl beneath trees seeking shade.
And it makes it difficult for us to find them because they kind of blend in, especially after a body has been decomposing.
Hennis is a Navy veteran and a licensed EMT whose parents brought him to the U.S. from Mexico illegally when he was 2 years old. This GoPro video from a previous search shows him treating a dehydrated migrant.
I mean, I feel American, but I mean, at the same time, I have my roots from Mexico, so I mean, I try to help out as much as I can.
The heat is oppressive, even through the trees. There are snakes and scorpions and cattle skeletons, even shredded female underwear. We keep losing each other. We repeatedly have to stop and regroup, finding each other by blowing whistles. We have to make it out before sunset, when smugglers inhabit this terrain. But we're not covering nearly enough ground.
If anything, we've done 1.25 miles.
We press on. Hennies and I find a Bible crawling with insects. I wonder if the person who dropped it made it out of this desert alive. Hundreds of people die crossing the border each year from things like dehydration or hypothermia. In Arizona alone, the death count is astounding. Official figures exclude the countless bodies that are never found. Ev Mead of the Transborder Institute says border deaths since the 1990s range as high as 10,000.
This is a large number of people. I mean, this is the kind of number we talk about when we talk about an armed conflict or a war.
He says the deaths are linked to U.S. border fence construction. Border crossing deaths were almost unheard of until the U.S. built long stretches of border fence in the 90s. Today, about 700 miles of the 2,000-mile border are fenced, mostly around cities. This has forced migrants onto remote, dangerous routes through the desert, with its extreme temperatures. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to expand current fencing along the border.
We're going to build a wall.
Mead says Trump's wall could increase migrant deaths. Already, people are rushing to cross the border before Trump's term begins. Some are dying on the way. Refugees are replacing economic migrants. They're increasingly desperate, undeterred by risks, Mead says. If Trump manages to secure the entire land border against the expectations of engineers, Mead says migrants will turn to the Gulf of Mexico or the Pacific Ocean, leading to mass migrant drownings like we're seeing in the Mediterranean.
We just really haven't had a serious policy discussion or a public discussion about the humanitarian consequences of the building of the wall.
Back in the desert, we pass barbed wire fencing. Could it be the fencing referred to in the text message? Suddenly, someone finds something.
You want to come up?
I scramble up a hill, following Hennies.
Might be him, but we don't know.
First, I see the skull. A few meters away are the legs, clothed in pants. The body has been torn apart by coyotes or some other animal. Henny says the body looks like it's been decomposing for about a month. Marco Antonio disappeared a month ago.
Unfortunately, we just found remains of a human being. We're going to investigate to see if it's him.
Garcia calls his relatives to tell them what we found.
Location, it's literally exactly about 10 meters up the arroyo.
The Aguilas get to work. They can't touch the body. It could be a crime scene. They note the coordinates of the remains, which they'll share with local police. Officials will pick up the body and take it to the medical examiner for DNA analyses. The men improvise a marker out of a balloon they find to help officials spot the body. Back at the vehicles, Garcia thanks the Aguilas for the search. He says they were the only people willing to help him. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
For updates on Garcia's case, visit kpbs.org and tune in tomorrow for part 2 of our series, the story of how the eagles of the desert came to exist. Frontiers reporting is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The U.S. consulate in Tijuana says some drug tunnels under the border are being reactivated. Mexican authorities found 2 tunnels in a warehouse district near Otay Mesa. One of those tunnels extended into the U.S., the other was not finished. Mexico's Attorney General says the Sinaloa drug cartel was apparently using the tunnels at one point to move drugs into the U.S.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour, Making the Grade, how the U.S. stacks up against the rest of the world when it comes to education. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
UC San Diego is one step closer to becoming an NCAA Division I university. The school's faculty voted to approve the athletics upgrade. Students have already given the okay. The change would increase athletic fees by $480 a year. The next step, a bid to actually join the Big West Conference, which already includes several UC schools. That could happen in January. Just in time for the holidays, today San Diego County officials distributed around 300 refurbished computers to local foster families. Officials say the Computers for Foster Families program attempts to increase internet access and provide better educational tools for foster children.
And ultimately, it's about these families and giving them a resource because they do so much for the kids that are in the system, and then the kids especially. I mean, they're having a tough time being able to just navigate life right now. So to give them a simple resource like a computer in the home, it's huge.
The program has given out about 3,000 computers since launching in 2001. About 2,600 children are currently part of the county's foster system. Well, grab your scarves and umbrellas because San Diego is in for some stormy weather. Shanae Shocker has more in tonight's forecast.
Well, here on our Tuesday, off to our north, we've been seeing some showers through the San Francisco area as well as in towards Reno. Now, what's causing their weather is actually going to be causing our weather heading towards the rest of this week. So we've been seeing some onshore flow here already, but what's going to change is we have this large area of low pressure and big dip in the jet stream that's pushing down into the south, and it's going to eventually cover into Southern California. Out ahead of that, that means we'll see some rainfall. But for tonight, we're staying cloudy with that onshore flow, that marine layer still building up throughout the nighttime hours. We do see those low clouds causing some flight delays and even potentially towards the morning as well. We'll see some fog in towards the valleys into tomorrow morning as well, and then they'll break up and we'll see some sunnier conditions. So out towards San Diego, 54 degrees into the metro area, but then we head towards the mountains into Ramona as well as Alpine, where the lower 40s, as well as out towards Mount Laguna, Borrego Springs at 47, and Oceanside as well at 47. Now, as we head towards our Wednesday, it's going to warm up just slightly. We'll continue to see that rain off to the parts of Northern California, and that's going to slowly shift down into the southwest. So as we head towards the latter half of this week into Thursday, Friday, and potentially even a little bit on towards Saturday, we'll see some rain, especially along the coast and into the mountains, parts of the deserts as well. Here's how this is going to play out as we head towards the coastal region. So clouds are going to begin to break throughout the day on Wednesday. Those low clouds, they do go away. We are slightly warmer, 67 degrees here. Now Thursday into Friday, we begin to see that front and that trough begin to approach Thursday. So especially throughout the evening, we'll be seeing the chances of some showers here. And then by Friday, we start to see those temperatures drop into the lower to mid 60s, and it's going to continue to be breezy as well with some of that rainfall. Now Saturday and Sunday, we break for some sunshine, but it is definitely cooler into the lower 60s with our lows into the upper 30s. Now inland, we're going to continue to see those showers throughout the afternoon, very similar to the coast, a cooling trend, but we get into the 50s for Saturday, breezy with some rain as well. And then by Sunday, we are back into the 60s. Now the mountains, it's going to get quite windy as we head towards our Friday. They'll be staying mostly dry towards Thursday, but we drop into the upper 50s with the possibility of an afternoon shower. Very windy into our Friday. We'll keep some of those breezes through Saturday morning, but it is quite cold. 39 degrees for our high on Saturday, 37 on Sunday with lows in the low 20s. Last but not least, out towards the desert, it's going to stay windy just like the mountains here as well. We're into the 60s come the beginning of the weekend, and we'll see some windier conditions on Friday and then some sun returning for the weekend, lows in the 30s. For KPBS News, I'm Shanae Shocker.
A new Star Wars movie opens a Friday with early screenings on Thursday night. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando says Rogue One, a Star Wars story, made the geek girl in her very happy.
We're home. Last year, The Force Awakens gave Star Wars fans the healing film they needed to signal that the dark times had finally ended. At last, we could embrace a Star Wars movie without embarrassment.
State your name for the record.
Jyn Erso. But Gareth Edwards' Rogue One is a true fanboy film that gives us the film we all wanted and introduces a new character into the Star Wars universe.
Congratulations. You are being rescued. Please do not resist.
Rogue One is the first of what Lucasfilm is calling the Star Wars standalone anthology films. These are neither prequels nor sequels, but rather expand the Star Wars universe. In the Star Wars timeline, Rogue One comes immediately before A New Hope and finds a group of rebel fighters attempting to steal the plans to the Death Star.
There's a 26% chance of failure. How much further? I don't know, I'm not sure. I never really come this way. We're close. We're close, I know that.
Well, now there's a 35% chance of failure.
I don't want to know. Thank you.
I understand.
The film not only satisfies the geek in me, but it also delivers a timely message about standing up for what you believe in.
If the Empire has this kind of power, what chance do we have?
What chance do we have? The question is, what choice? Run, hide, plead for mercy, scatter your forces. You give way to an enemy this evil with this much power, and you condemn the galaxy to an eternity of submission. The time to fight is now.
But then Star Wars films have always been an allegory about fighting tyrannical leaders and repressive regimes. Rogue One is the perfect film to end 2016 on because it leaves us with a new hope. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.